As fun as it is to watch us here at Night's Watch suffer through terrible media, you know what's even more fun? Good media. And here is a great one that you can dive into right now. It's the graphic novel adaptation of my book, Chronicles of Everfall, Shadow of the Conqueror, Enemies of Self. I hired one of the best artists in the business, Mike S. Miller. The art is fantastic. No expenses were spared. We paid for great colouring, lettering, and of course we put in heaps of our own time to produce the best quality graphic novel we can. This is top tier, and guys, you will genuinely love it. The launch campaign is out. You can get it in collector covers, leather bound, and I've released the second edition of my novel in the collector edition covers and leather bound as well. They're only available for a short time. Collector edition, high quality, and of course a really awesome story for you to enjoy. So do secure your copy as soon as you can and enjoy some high quality media as I continue to suffer through horrible media and the occasional good media like this one here, House of Dragons Episode 6. Welcome back to The Watch. Okay, House of Dragons, episode 6. So, interesting episode for me. One of the more interestings because I'm a bit more divided on this one than really any other episode. It's not to say it isn't bad. The competence of this show is consistent. It's still very good. Thank goodness for that. Though there is a point of criticism that I have with a certain, I guess, justification for a character's action that I'll mention in the spoiler section that I don't think was done very well at all. And that is probably the biggest criticism I could have for the show overall. And if this is one of the few things, the show is still going very good. And even for this episode, if this is the only criticism, I can kind of get past it like I was able to get past with the inconsistent element in episode 3 with the justification of the Crab King committing his army to go after Daemon. This one is probably a bit worse. It's pretty strong in terms of it just doesn't make sense, but everything else is done really well. And there's a moment there's a scene in particular I particularly loved. It involves sword fighting, of course, but also what it establishes. Very important things is established. Not only that scene, which I liked, but many other scenes. This is a very important episode that does push forward the conflict and set up for the rest of the series in a big way. And it's interesting because it's kind of like episode, was it 5? No, episode 4 was like a build-up and there was big payoff in episode 5, and episode 6 seems like another kind of building-up episode, which hopefully will get some really interesting and big payoffs in episode 7. It is the biggest time jump. We've passed 10 years to reach this episode, and two of the main characters, the Queen and Princess, have new actresses, which do a fine enough job. I don't think Rhaenyra's actress matches the younger version great, but you can get over it in terms of what you want is consistency. You want the characters to be consistent even in there, and if there are any changes, to be justified in a way that obviously makes sense, and they do that. The characters are both consistent, and if they're showing a bit more strength, a bit more authority, it's been justified as well, based on what we can intuit has happened over these 10 years. It felt like a very Game of Thrones-ish type of episode, if I can say that, in terms of certain machinations and plots and bad things happening as well. When I say machinations, it's like, the people who are involved in the deep kind of whispers and that level of politicking, where it's more back, alley dealings, or in the shadows. Yes, in the shadow. That's the word I was looking for. In the shadow kind of politics happening. And that gave it a bit more of a Game of Thrones feel, which some people really like. And some people might get annoyed at that. Overall, because I'm more undecided on this episode than any other one, even though I can see a lot of the merits and good things in it, there's an error in it, there's a flaw in it as well, and as a result, this is probably my least liked episode overall, but it's not to take away the quality and enjoyment that is in the show, because I'm still enjoying it quite a lot. I would give this a good solid 7 out of 10. The problem that, there's a bit of a plot hole, is just, again, how they justify certain characters' actions. That could bring it down a solid point. Still, we're in very positive territory. Hope they will just keep going good, because characters I feel so sorry for Viserys. Oh, my heart breaks for the guy. Still one of my favorite characters. Damon appears, doesn't do anything massive, but is still Damon. And we're introduced to certain children as well. Interesting. It's a lot of setting up, basically. And you're intrigued. You want to see where it's going. One of the biggest moments with this episode is actually with what was a side character who is now obviously going to be a very big player. And that was a big wow moment. It was at the kind of conclusion of the episode. That draws you in. And that was done really well. I'm intrigued by this character. And that's one of the strengths of this show. Great characters, not necessarily good, a lot bad, but they're intriguing and you're invested and you want to see where it's going. So still very happy with the show. Looks like where it's going is really going to be intriguing. I'm absolutely on board, even though I didn't like this episode as much. It's probably a lot of my own personal taste. I mean, I like more swords, more action, everything. But we'll dive into the spoilers now. So it opens up with the princess, heir to the throne, in labor. And one thing that I was happy with, they show her, pretty darn, happy with, she has a baby, she loves this child and everything. I'm glad, they have the kind of mother's affection that they often mostly have, of course, to their children. The thing is, though, it seemed a little bit out of character with the build-up of Rhaenyra, because she was saying in the previous one she doesn't want to have children, she doesn't want to be a slave to the baby bed, basically, the birthing bed. And then now she is. Now, it's not to say that this can't be justified, because in discussing it, I'm still having those great discussions with Nerdrotic, Gary from Nerdrotic, Mola, Jane Theory, and there is justification for her now having children, because in the last episode she was committed to do her duty. She will get married, and part of getting married is the duty of having children. Of course, big, conversation and the contextualization of the conflict is as to who are the children's parents. We know who the mother is, but the father, of course, is the question. And I think they mostly executed that well enough. The Queen, so Alicent, she calls to have a look at the baby. She says she wants to see the baby, not the princess, not Rhaenyra here, but Rhaenyra doesn't want to be separated from her child and demands that, she goes as well. But that means getting up out of her bed while, just after having given birth. And this raises a question, potential, error in the execution of something here. But in terms of what this is implied by the Queen, it's a massive power move. And right out of the gate, in the beginning of this episode, which really does show the competence that's on display, is that this gives us so much context about the relationship between the two, the perspective of the Queen, the power that she now has. This is all really, really significant. And all contextualized by us saying, I want to see the child, and Rhaenyra it's like she can't argue. She's submitting to the Queen's authority here, so much so that she doesn't want to be separated from the child, so she'll force herself out of bed just after giving birth and struggle to get there in person. Now, there's a other underlining implication here about why does the Queen want to see the child, and we know through context a bit later on, it's actually to check who the child looks like, okay? Because there's later on, in this episode, questioning about parentage, and so it's a message to Rhaenyra that the Queen, she is still not believing any possible deflection that these are legitimate children and the father who they said are really the father. One of the errors that happens is that Rhaenyra, the princess, she says, all right, I'll get up, and I'm a father of 5, been with my wife through each one of the labours, and after the baby comes out, something else needs to happen before everything's done, and it hasn't happened yet. And getting up right before that, I was like, oh, well, hold up, it's a bit soon. And then they kind of lead into, they call it the second birth. But she would know of that too. This is her third child. She knows that something else is coming out. You're not going to be ready to get up now with something else coming out. And what, she's going to be walking through the halls with that dropping? It's like, and also with that coming out, she wouldn't really be able to remain on her feet. And so the fact that she just says, I'll go now, is obviously, she wouldn't be able to do that. Anyway, they have the second birth, and then she walks. Now, the ability for a woman to walk right after completing the birth process with all its parts, it is possible. In fact, my own wife, we had one of our children who needed to go into the nursery under observation, and of course, my wife wanted to be close to her child. She really wanted to just see her, touch her, and so my wife got out of bed like a couple of minutes after everything was done, and walked to the nursery to see her child. And the doctors and nurses were like, well, you're up and about. And it's because, my wife wanted to see the child. So it can happen. And it wasn't easy. She was unstable. I was there to help her. But it's different for every woman. And so it's not out of the realm of possibility that, she's able to do this. And she struggles. And there's her husband helping her out. And so I was able to accept it. And then they get to the Queen. Of course, the Queen is like, why are you here? You should be resting, okay? But she probably even knows what's really going on. The King comes. I love him. He's just a bit oblivious, but he loves seeing his grandchild. He's all happy. And there is a bombshell line that Alicent says to the husband, where he's like, keep trying, Sir Laenor. And then it follows up with, soon or late you may get one who looks like you. And so, bit of a slap in the face. And she has the authority and power, to get away with it. But what really makes this obvious is when we see Rhaenyra's other children, and we see them in the scene. See these two darker-haired boys, and as soon as I saw this, I was like, no one is ever going to think that this guy's their father. In actual fact, there's someone else in frame who's very obviously the father. You're pointing out you pick it up very easily, and I think this is intentional. And this would have been an issue if the show betrayed that really anyone who was willing to look at this fairly and objectively was fooled by this. And they're basically showing no one's fooled by this. Even the King, who is in a big state of denial because of the implications of it, even he basically knows. And we'll see what, later on in that scene, what he says that acknowledges this. And so it's like an unspoken truth. The thing is, though, things like that exist in the world. There are unspoken truths that everyone is aware of, where, think about, yes, Harvey Weinstein. Everyone knew what he was up to, and he got away with it for ages because of the power and influence and position he was in, and there were jokes about it and everything. People knew that this guy, and people warned other people about it beforehand, and it seems like the show is kind of portraying this kind of setup. Everyone who has eyes is kind of aware these aren't legitimate children, but the father isn't denying it. He's claiming, so not this father, we're talking about this, I forget his name, but he's not denying it, and he has his own secrets that he wants to keep, so even though they're not very well-kept secrets. And as a result, people are going along with it, yet this, of course, has massive implications, because if these children are not legitimate, well, Rhaenyra, she's already considered as got a shaky claim for being simply a woman in this world, and that a lot of people won't accept her claim to the throne for being a woman, and they feel a woman can't inherit the throne. And then, on top of that, if she's going to say her heirs are these children who are clearly not legitimate, they are bastards, right? That is doubly an affront and offence to anyone who respects the tradition of this world, and also to the stability of the realm. Massive problems. Massive problems. So they set this up really well, and you could, what they have here, who the dad is, and look, he shows the affection that this is his child, and they're able to show it without telling you. It's pretty clear. Introduced to the sons of both Alicent and Rhaenyra here, and one of the sons, this is one of the, I get confused with the names. This is one of the sons of Rhaenyra, who is, he's the second born, so he's not the actual heir to the throne, but they're trying to teach him to, actually, this might be the eldest. But anyway, he's learning to, control his dragon. He has a dragon, and so they're setting up he will be a dragon rider. Yeah, he's the older one. And the second born to Alicent, he doesn't have a dragon, and they tease him about having a pig. And then he walks down to, he's obviously upset, and he walks down to where the dragons are kept. And I'm just wondering, does anyone keep an eye on this? I mean, the previous scene was that the dragon keepers were right nearby. But, alright, they just let him down. Again, one of those small little things that are like, you'd think people would be keeping, an eye on who goes down here or not. This next scene introduces Allison's daughter, and she's a bit weird, but in an intriguing kind of way. She's speaking to bugs. The theory is she could be actually prophesying about certain things, because she says stuff that's related to the brother who's just come in here about his future. Which is, okay, I'm very intrigued where they'll take this. Really important scene here. Allison is basically saying it very bluntly to Viserys that the children are illegitimate and this is a big problem. And Viserys, he doesn't want to hear any of it because of the implications and stuff. And Allison says 1 is an accident, 3 is an insult. I think she has a point. Like, you might be able to say 1 child could look different to the parents because of some genetic anomalies, but 3 in a row that all have this consistent look? Viserys has, he gives an analogy about how he had a black mare, and he met a white stallion, and they had a foal, so a baby horse that was chestnut brown, didn't look at all like the parents. But then Alice, what I like about this, it's something that Viserys puts forward as kind of an analogy to explain what's happening with his daughter. But then Alicent is like, but did you see the horses actually partake in the deed? You have no confirmation that the foal is actually the child of those 2 parents as you think. What's good about this is that it's an analogy that's given in context to what's going on, to the point where a character in the scene actually questions that analogy by flipping it back on the person who said it. The point of reference why I find this intriguing, and Mauler pointed this out on our discussion, is that in Rings of Power there's lots of analogies that just don't make any bloody sense. And people just go on with like it actually meant something meaningful when it doesn't. If anyone was to question it, you'd be like, what the hell does that mean? That's bloody ludicrous. Well, it's like, a dog can bark at the moon, but he can't bring it down. Do you know why? Do you know why a boat floats and a stone does not? Because the boat looks up and the stone. Ridiculous, right? But here's one that the implications are so clear and obvious, and then it's actually intertwined in the narrative, and the character questions it. Just shows you the contrast in the talent of the writing in these shows. And so yes, this is where Alicent says, "How do you know it was the Silver Stallion?" And the king is no fool, and in actual fact, he might be the wisest person here, because this seems to be the only one that, there might be other people who understands if you acknowledge this could tear apart the realm. This is not good. And he says it here, and so it's not like he can't see the truth. Like, look at him, he understands. His head is hanging in regret. He shakes his head and is like, think of the consequences here. Says the consequences of an allegation like the one you toy at would be dire. Yeah, and that's an understatement, but he understands it. Rip apart the realm in civil war. So the king's actions, his self-imposed ignorance is very understandable. Okay, he knows where this could lead. But Alicent is in an interesting position because she is afraid for her own children's safety. She thinks if Rhaenyra takes a throne, and she says it very bluntly to her elder son in this episode, is that to get rid of any challenge to her own legitimacy, which is in question more now than ever before because of these illegitimate children, Rhaenyra would have to kill any other claims. And so, in terms of Alicent's position here, it's very justified, and it's even more dire than ever before, because with this 3rd child that does not look like the father, there's even greater chances the realm will not accept Rhaenyra as the ruler and that these are her heirs. And if Rhaenyra wants to ensure that there's no other options that the people could turn to, yes, Alicent's children are in danger. Would Rhaenyra really go that far? She is not a decent person. She hasn't gone as far as murder or anything, but she's been very irresponsible, more irresponsible than Alicent. And I don't know, I wouldn't put it past her, Targaryens, they've done things it's not out of the ordinary with there's a Targaryen family. So you can understand Alicent's position here. Sir Christian Cole is back, and he's very loyal to Alicent, and we find out that he does not like Rhaenyra, justifiably so, and he says it very plainly, that, Rhaenyra is basically a snake, essentially, and... so the Princess Rhaenyra is brazen and relentless, a spider who stings and sucks her prey dry. You know what he's referring to, like, that's what he feels was done to him. And then he calls her a selfish C-word, like just flat out. But it's actually justified from his position. What was done to him by Rhaenyra was awful, awful. And it's important with what he ends up doing in this episode. So this is the scene where Alicent says it black and white to her eldest son that if Rhaenyra comes to power, your life could be forfeit. Just simply living and breathing is a challenge to her claim to the throne. Black and white now, it's a bit rushed, admittedly. Probably would have worked better with a better build-up, but you could also justify it with she's snapping, especially with this last child now, where everyone is aware of what's going on, and it's time that, the son knows. We get to see Daemon, and Daemon is getting along really well with his new wife, right? They've been married for over 10 years here, but we only saw their first kind of interaction in the last episode. I like that this show is not afraid to just move things forward. And again, compare this to Rings of Power, where how many hours? 5, 6, I've lost count, hours in the show. And it's barely moved anywhere. Where this show, it'll pass 10 years, introduce characters properly in a single episode, and then a lot of these characters end up dying, and it just moves past them. And some of them I really liked, and the show is got enough faith in itself that, look, even though you probably like these characters, we're not going to be, hung up on them and need to just drag them out. Like, no, we got other characters you'll also like. And so good on it for having the balls to do that. We get some interesting further insight to Daemon here, and it's that he seems to be a pretty good dad. He is reading to his daughter, teaching her, it looks like Old Valyrian, the language, and he also loves his wife. They have a disagreement about a proposal that was given to them, but it's important context that, look, Daemon's is being a good husband and father here, and what happens towards the end also contextualizes certain things, certain actions, because there's an interesting contrast. We're in the spoiler section, so you should be aware, but his wife gets into the same position as what the Queen did in episode 1, that she can't deliver a baby, and that there's a choice to try cesarean, and Daemon actually says no. He tries to prioritize his wife's life in this case. It's not to say the king, made the wrong choice necessarily in the first episode, because it was a really tough choice, and from his perspective, it was lose them both or to save the baby. But in this instance, Daemon chooses the different choice, which shows just, like, if Daemon is this complete, like, worst choice to throw, no, it's actually showing signs that he would probably be a pretty good king. He pays attention to the little people, and we saw that in one of the previous episodes. He actually spends time amongst them. He is good at politicking to the point where he put people in their place if he doesn't have any, patience for them. But he seems to be, when he has a wife he likes, devoted enough and a good father. There is something that isn't explained, and look, it's to the show's credit that it doesn't need to hold the audience's hand, because I can easily intuit a reason, even though the show doesn't give it to us. It goes a little too far, because I don't think I'd need to have to do this heavy lifting, and I think this would have been helpful if they had just a small little line to help contextualize it, to explain how Daemon is in this position. Why doesn't he have his own castle, his own lands and everything like that? Wasn't he set to inherit all the lands of his wife? And here it seems like he's just been traveling. He doesn't have any set holdings that are his own. He has his dragons. He's been having a good time with his wife and family. But the fact that they're entertaining this offer to have this manor and these lands and holdings is implication that he doesn't have anything else better than it, which is why he would entertain it, which raises the question, what happened? Again, you can explain it with your own headcanon easily enough that the family, his former wife's family, they hate Daemon. They think he murdered him. So they could have easily done something to disinherit him in gaining it. Daemon obviously hates those people and hates that region, and so he probably wouldn't care too much if he didn't want it. And maybe the previous scene where he says, let's talk about inheritance, was more of a threat, saying if you push this... assertion that I killed my wife, I can rob you of everything, so don't bother doing it. And nothing else has been accused of him in this episode, so it seems like no one has pushed the accusation, and that could be him not pursuing the inheritance and robbing, because that guy who was accusing him, he was set to inherit what his wife had, Damon's wife, but Damon had a strong claim that he could have challenged. Look, it's headcanon, it's an easy enough explanation, and so in these instances, I'm not too critical where there are questions raised about what to explain certain things, because there is so much context in the show that can lead us to satisfying conclusions. It's when we need an explanation, that there's nothing in the show that's justified or helps us explain what happened, that's where you get into the bad writing territory. Still, yeah, I feel I have to go too far, be a bit too generous in the headcanon in my own explanation to give that, where it could have been given with just a simple line and would be fine. Okay, easily my favourite scene in this episode. It's just so much plays out, which is consistent with the characters, contextualizes characters, sets up something really significant, and it all works really, really well. So Sir Cole is basically only paying attention to Alicent's children, who he feels, clearly by context, is the true heirs, and is ignoring the actual, heirs who he believes, and he knows quite correctly, they're illegitimate. I love that Viserys, he just he wants peace, he wants his family to be happy, and he's just there enjoying it, seeing his grandchildren. He thinks it's all good, that they're sparring, they're playing, they'll build lifelong bonds. It's not going to happen. I feel so sorry for the poor guy. I love Viserys. Oh, my heart breaks for him. What a great character, though. Look, out of anything, even if this show goes off the rails, honestly, I'm going to be grateful for Viserys as a character, because he's just a good character, good guy. I don't know. I connect with him, right? Okay, so Sir Cole is training, like I said, favouring the two blonde boys. And Sir Strong, he is on the town guard. He points out, you seem to be favour these two. Why don't you look to the other two? And you understand why he's saying it, because he's the actual father, and he wants his own sons to be taught and trained, and he feels they're the legal heirs at the moment, so don't ignore them. Cole's like, you question my methods, sir? I merely suggest that methods be applied to all your pupils. So you already see a bit of, tension there. I'm going to skip back just a little bit, because the thing that causes Sir Strong to comment on this is the fact that Sir Cole gets both blonde boys to fight him at once, showing that, he is focusing on them. And I just wanted to give small credit to the choreography that played out. And it's not like the best thing ever, but it's believable with where the skill level that the two young boys should be at. They're telegraphing their swings, and you'll notice that Sir Cole, he's got a straight posture, hand behind his back, but is keeping his sword forward, and there's a distinct difference in competence between the two that is justified, where the two young boys, they're still learning, they're still training. Contrast that with a certain fight scene that we got out of Rings of Power recently, where she's fighting Numenorians, which should be much better than these than they were displayed. And then the choreography, see an overcommitted swing, deflection, let him move past, justifiable, and they're showing Sir Cole perfectly, in control of what's going on. Both boys swing together, he pushes them down, and see that, again, overcommitting, over-lunging, and he just pushes it aside with a deflection. These are simple choreographed moves, but they come across far more believable and justifiable than, say, Rings of Power. It works. And he even gives them a good slap. This one, they're overcommitting again with these lunges, and he just, parries it aside, gives them a slap, and then this is where Sir Strong says, let them all, why don't you teach them all? And so Sir Cole puts one of their the eldest boy, who's the son of Rhaenyra, against the eldest son of Alicent. Eldest son against eldest son, as he says. Now, Sir Strong tries to object by saying it's hardly a fair match, but what Sir Cole says, look, it fits, just well. And also, it's a subtle dig. This is where this scene is doing multiple things. Not only is it justifying what's going on, a younger guy fighting an older guy, he also puts in a jab to Sir Strong, which is showing their relationship, that they don't like each other very much. And look, that's, it's doing multiple things. I know you've never seen true battles, sir, but when steel is drawn, a fair match isn't something anyone should expect. And that's honestly a true thing. Like even, that's why in sword training, HEMA and other things like that, it's fun to try and face a disproportionate, unmatched, unfair matchup. Like go and get someone with a shield and sword with only a single weapon on that you have, or let them use a spear or poleaxe against a weapon with shorter reach, daggers. It's just fun to see how, if you like, just to train to try and know the ways to overcome disadvantages. It's just perfectly a fair thing from a teacher's perspective here. Now we come to another contrast in this show versus Rings of Power, because it is a swords master, essentially, giving commentary on how to fight while a fight is taking place. In Rings of Power, it was Galadriel, so the supposed swordmaster, and her comments were like, "Fight with your feet and not your hands," which is ridiculous. Yes, footwork is important, but your hands play a big part. Also, there's many ways to kill an orc. It's like, oh, really? I thought there was only one. Dumb lines like that. And then I'll keep it short and strong. Thrust, twist, and gut. And it's like, stabbing in the gut? That's not an instant kill. So the things that she says doesn't make sense with what she's trying to establish. But listen to what Sir Cole says in this fight in terms of what the young guy should do. Close with him. So basically, he has an advantage of height, leverage, reach, and so if he closes and pushes his advantage, it'll put, this younger, shorter guy on the back foot. That's perfectly logical, yes. So he says, close with him, and then he also says, press him backwards. This is all valid, logical stuff that you would do in this circumstance, so it's actually good advice. And then he says, stay on the attack and use your feet. And so he does use his feet. He gives him a good boot. Everything makes sense. It's night and day when you compare Rings of Power to House of the Dragon, where, again, we have a sword fight, we have someone commenting on things, what they should do in the sword fight to get an advantage, everything, and one makes complete sense, and the other one is complete utter nonsense. It's night and day, the quality in these shows. And you don't know if this was Sir Cole's plan all along, but it gets him exactly what he wants, and so maybe it was, where he says, don't let him get up, and so Sir Cole knows that this is Sir Strong's son, okay? But it's also perhaps his testing it to see, all right, if you want to deny that you're not, this boy's father, let's see what you're willing to do if I push this boy into, potential danger. And so he says, don't let him get up. And he's pushing the other guy on, stay on the attack, and look at it. So he knows his nose is goading him and is basically forcing Sir Strong to react. This is a great scene, right? And it's exactly what happens. And so Sir Strong comes in enough, pushes him away, and Sir Cole's, you forget yourself, Strong. That's the prince that you just said. And then Strong says, you're being cruel. And the key line, the key kind of knife in the ribs, right? It's quite unusual, Commander. Most men would only have that kind of devotion towards a cousin, a brother, or a son. And that just makes Sir Strong snap and attacks a King's Guard. And pay attention to Sir Cole, because Sir Cole doesn't even fight back. He just lets it happen, and then he even smiles, which really indicates that this is exactly what he wanted. So Sir Cole is just screaming, say it again, but still reacting like that is all but an admission, and the show plays out that everyone kind of responds that way. And look at it, Sir Cole, he is smiling. That's exactly, thought as much. So he takes it as confirmation, and it spreads rumors and causes everything to go off the rails for Rhaenyra. Just a brilliantly done scene. The logical setup, the process of events, one thing naturally led on to another, and it was justified with the characters. And it also involved sword fights. What's not to love? Rhaenyra is told that there's been an incident. She goes to try and speak to Sir Strong, but walks in on the hand of the king, which is Sir Strong's father. He's also Sir Strong, but I forget their first names. Talking and saying this is all a big mess. But the father knows. Now, a good criticism, and Mauler brought this up as well, is that they're saying some really dangerous things out in the open. If anyone overheard this and they're just admitting that, Sir Strong is the father of, the heirs to the throne, and someone heard, oh, it's crazy. So Lionel, that's the father, says, you've laid us open to accusations, and in a big way. But the fact that Rhaenyra is listening to that conversation is also really telling, because she knows that everyone's going to have stronger, not only stronger assumptions, like take it as confirmation of the truth, and that is not good for her. Remember that the Queen is married? Well, we see him again, and this basically contextualizes that the husband, he will be the King Regent, is basically a layabout. He just likes to drink, spend time with men, pretend that he's a warrior. He wants to go off and fight, but she demands that he stays because she needs her, and then orders him as the Queen, and he obeys. She orders him as, well, future Queen, is what I'm saying. Loved this scene, okay, so it's the council, and we see who are the people who have the most authority, and it's Rhaenyra and Alicent. But Alicent trumps Rhaenyra. She even, makes certain, decisions with the king's seeming approval, but she's the one basically pulling the string. She was the one who calls the council to the end. Rhaenyra offers a marriage between her firstborn and Alicent's daughter. And I love that the king, he's like, yeah, that's a great decision, but he's like, what a good, good offer. But Alicent's like, not a chance. I'm not letting my daughter marry an illegitimate bastard, basically. And because also, by doing that, that would legitimize Rhaenyra's kind of line and the inheritance of her children and things. And this is something that Alicent, won't even have a bar of. But what's interesting is that the king, Viserys, is almost ready to say yes right then and there. And she says, we'll discuss this further. And he goes with it. So she has the authority. She's one of the most powerful people, if not the most powerful person in the kingdom at the moment. Odd kind of thing. The Queen is breastfeeding and she's leaking, and she acts all embarrassed about it and everything. Oh, I don't know. Look, I mean, my wife's breastfed all of our children, and there's been sometimes a stigma around it, but also it's like, if she's her third child, sometimes mothers are just like, yeah, so what? It's just a natural part, and it's what happens when I'm nursing a child. Deal with it. And so I'm not sure she would be that embarrassed about small little wet patches the way that she is, and especially with the world setting, there wouldn't be nearly the type of stigma that sometimes people exist in the modern day, where they think it's inappropriate for a mother to breastfeed their child when they need to and things. But back then, that's the only option. People would be used to it. And so the fact that she's so embarrassed about it actually feels like a kind of like a modern notion being injected into a setting that just does not fit. Okay, she wouldn't be so embarrassed about it. She's just like, so what? Deal with it. I'm trying to do something here. So took me a bit out of place with the reactions here. Alicent calls an end to the meeting, showing her authority. And the king is like, the proposal is a good one, my queen. And listen to what she says. You may do as you wish, husband, because the husband wants to accept the proposal, when I am cold in my grave. And so she's dead against it, but also shows the amount of power that she has here. They talk about it further, and she's looking after her husband. I like that as well. But she also says, we can't let our children marry them with their, I think, appearance or complexion, but she you know what she's... So Lionel Strong comes in and tries to resign as hand of the king, and he feels that for the sake of honor, the disgrace of what his son has done is too great, and everyone kind of knows this, right? And so there's probably scandalous things being said about him, his family, especially his son and stuff, and so he wants to try and do the honorable thing. And so I kind of like Lionel Strong. I think he's been a pretty good character so far. And then, spoiler, he dies at the end. So again, we get to like characters that are taken from us. At least we've had Viserys for so long. I thought he was probably going to go last episode. I thought he went last episode. But he's still alive. He's still hanging in there. The thing is, though, he wants to resign for the disgrace of what his son has done. And the king's like, all right, if it's so bad, speak it plainly. If you're going to resign, tell me exactly what it is. And Alicent's like, yeah, speak it plainly. But Lionel has too much honor and respect to come out and say it because it would be such a slight to Rhaenyra, the king's daughter. But the king is like, well, then you don't have a proper reason to resign. I'm not letting you. And then he says, all right, well, look, my son, basically, he committed assault against the king's guard. I'm sending him back to, Harrenhal, and let me take him there. And the king agrees. And then the queen goes to discuss something else with another Strong, but this is a different Strong. This is Larys Strong, the younger brother, who we've seen, here and there in previous episodes, but he becomes a major player, especially with what he does in this episode. And, he's not a likable character for what he does, but he is one of those intriguing characters. And you can like him in the sense of he's intriguing, devious, well-written, everything like that, but he's not likable in the sense that he's a good person. That's what I meant by that. Because I like how well-written his character is and how devious and cunning he is. And he's also well-acted, well-cast for this role. And he knows what's going on. And the conversation basically goes to the hand of the king that... The queen says that, my father, Otto, the former hand, he just would have said the truth, bluntly. So yeah, this is Alicent saying her father wouldn't hesitate to speak the truth to the king if Otto Hightower was still king. And then Larys says, you cannot say, my queen, that your father would be impartial. And then this is where Alicent says, no, but he would be partial to me. This is important because, well, as we find out, Larys takes that as... a request that he feels he can resolve. And yeah, it's like, we know what happens in the episode. Kill his own father, who is the Hand of the King, which will enable Otto have an opening to return to his role as Hand of the King. And so Larys, he'll murder his father and brother. One, to become the heir of Harrenhal, for his own gain. Also, it's a very cunning, awful, evil move, but it's very cunning because it serves him, because it also doesn't ingratiate himself, but it shows how loyal he is to the queen and what level he's willing to go towards. And there's a lot of other people who would be accused of potentially performing that act before him. He's the son. Why would the son do it? People might say to get the title and everything, but there's a lot of second-born sons who don't go that far, as well as the fact that Sir Strong, this is the older brother, is accused of, rightly so, of being the true father of the heirs to the throne. That these, those children are actually bastards and they're illegitimate. And as a result, to shut up, there's a lot of people who would want to see him dead, the father, to shut him up so the truth can't get out before they would look to Larys, which is him. And so, really significant. We see that Larys, he recruits criminals, cuts out their tongue, and they're on death row, and so you can see why they would choose to, serve Larys in that role. Okay, so here we come to the big problem. Daemon's wife is in childbirth, and the child is basically can't be delivered. The physician who's trying to do it is at the end of his ability. And he says that, I'm very sorry, my prince, we could try and essentially perform a cesarean, lay open the womb, release the baby, try to remove the infant, as they say, by way of the blade, right? But they don't even know if the baby's still alive at this point. Yeah, I cannot say for a surety whether it lives, meaning, the infant. And then Daemon asks, will his wife survive? And he says, no, not going to survive. And so Daemon has a choice here, but what's really interesting is he shakes his head. So here it is. I missed this first watching. I needed to go back to realize that this is Daemon saying, no, don't, risk, essentially, kill my wife to try and save the child. Like, he shakes his head. Look, there it is. Shook his head. But then looks to his wife. Now, this is where it kind of gets weird, because I can't tell if Daemon is looking and noticing that she just left. And just a few seconds ago, she was still struggling in labor. And to me, that's actually him looking at her, trying to go with the help, but because there's heavy breathing. But one of the confusion is that he was looking to her and she was gone. And that this is where she gets up and leaves to go outside. And it's bizarre if that's what they were trying to say, that she suddenly left in that moment when Daemon was just thinking about what to do, got all the way outside, without anyone noticing, and Damon not able to catch up with her, where she's barely able to walk. That's confusing already, but the justification as to why she's doing this, just honestly, it doesn't make sense. She doesn't know if she's going to die. Like, there's a way to save her life by like, if the baby's dead and there's just a dead fetus in there now, there are ways to remove the fetus and save the mother's life. So they don't establish that it's too far gone for her. So why is she committing suicide then? And if all they needed to say is that she's lost too much blood or something and she can't be saved, that then she could choose to go out like a dragon rider with fire, that would make perfect. I wouldn't be complaining at all then. But they don't even explain that the baby is actually dead yet. And so what's frustrating, they could have earned this payoff, which is her dying by fire, without betraying logic or the flow of events, by just having the baby be a stillborn, die upon, delivery, and then have it that she has lost too much blood and there's no way to save her, and then she chooses to go out, and she could even say, Damon, I want to die like a dragon rider, and Damon could help her to this point, and they could get the payoff. And it's not that hard to come to that answer. So why did they not explain to have something so bafflingly dumb where she just seems to teleport outside and choose to commit suicide when every other context of the scene seems to say that she wouldn't have died? She's still, nothing's killing. Yeah, she has the baby, but you can get the baby out. And so there's no justification. There's no explanation to solve this. This is a legitimate error. Big, dumb moment. And just makes you, how do they do this? Because they have talented writers. They've done great logic. Like, they've shown that they can write well. And so why did they do this when there's an easy retelling of events to get the payoff that they want? I don't know. But definitely needs to be called out for being very stupid, honestly. And it's a powerful scene as well, which is annoying because Dracarys is the word that we get through the context of, not only this episode, but I think other episodes, is the command for a dragon to breathe fire. And she's commanding her dragon to breathe fire. And the dragon's like, what, you're my master. I can't do that. And then she cries, Dracarys. Dragon doesn't want to do it. And eventually seems to come to an understanding that the dragon must obey. And look, it's a powerful scene, massive flame, and this is only now does Damon come out like he just noticed her missing. So it's frustrating, and it's probably the biggest error flaw in the show so far. I hope it's one of the few. We don't get many of them. I hope it's not a sign that the show's turning to be a bit, bad, have lack of thought in terms of payoffs and everything. Let's hope it's a one-off. We'll see. Because if it's bad, I'll call it out. Like this. I like the show. I still think this episode is pretty darn good, okay? Still doesn't mean it's perfect, and this is just, I don't see an explanation. And by the way, if people say, Shad, it's obviously because of this reason or that reason, is it shown in the episode? Is there context that you are giving evidence for from what the characters do and say? Otherwise it's just headcanon, and you can't excuse bad writing with your own charitable headcanon by injecting reason that isn't in the show or hasn't been indicated, okay? Because even if there was small indication, all right, and they don't necessarily dispel it, because this show is great at not spelling things out, even just again, the reason why Damon killed his first wife, it doesn't need to tell us. In actual fact, there's a lot of interesting speculation to explain what's going on, but there's enough in the show to give us a possible reason. And so the speculation that we're then led to is more justified. I don't see a lot of justified reason to explain why the wife just is choosing to commit suicide now. And it's not because she's in an unhappy marriage. A lot of the episode was that they had a great marriage and they really liked each other. She's loving being a dragon rider. He seems to be a devoted husband. They were very lovey-dovey together and things. And so it wasn't just get out of a marriage she didn't like. So again, if you're going to try and explain this big error, this plot hole, find what's actually in the show, and I'm looking at it, I can't see it. Interesting scene here. So Strong is saying goodbye to Rhaenyra, and when I was watching this, with how familiar he is with the boys here, I was thinking, how could the boys not really know that this is their actual dad? He is very, very, there's an actual moment. look at how close he is with the baby here, you know? Like, there will be a stranger when we meet again and stuff. And from this scene, I was thinking, do the children not know? Because that would be a stretch if they don't. And then, look, the show comes through at times because that question is hanging in the air. But then one of the boys literally just asks, is he my real father? That would be the obvious question that would be hanging in the air. And I'm glad that they acknowledge what's being shown on screen, because it's pretty obvious to any observer. And the son notices it as well. Yeah, see, is Harwin Strong my father? He just comes out and asks it. And, Rhaenyra, her answer is very political, which is basically confirmation at this point, because listen to what she says. At least she looks around that no one's listening, because you are a Targaryen. That's all that matters. It's like, basically, yeah, you are a bastard, but you're still my child because you're a Targaryen. So yeah, you basically confirmed it. We see the husband sparring with, obviously his boyfriend. And Rhaenyra comes and says, basically, they're leaving. They're going to go to Dragon's Reach. Now, this is a very interesting decision. This is one of those ones where at least there's enough context in the show to justify it. It's a bad decision. In my mind, okay, it's a horrible political decision. Not the worst decision she could make politically, but it could be the necessary decision to save her children's lives. If it's become so obvious that her children are illegitimate that even her own kids are asking now, am I a bastard, right? Well, it's going to be pretty darn obvious to everyone else, and I feel, okay, I could accept that as a justified reason for her to basically say, I can't resolve this. Even if I stay, whatever thing I say, whatever I do, I'll never be able to question this rumor. It's too obvious. It's too out in the open. Especially, so Strong going away. She doesn't have enough allies. It's the only thing that she can do to keep her family safe. She needs to get away. I can accept that, even though it's a very bad political move, because now, she can't control the narrative at all. There's no one to oppose Alicent, and Alicent could, if the king dies and she's not at that capital, Alicent can just say, these are the true heirs, take the throne, because whoever's at the capital can control the capital, right? And her moving away, she loses a lot of influence and ability to do that, but like I said, it can be justified, and that's good enough. I can accept that, right? It's when there isn't enough, I guess, shown, depicted in the show to give us enough reason, validation to explain some decisions, like Daemon's wife just committing suicide, where this clearly has enough things that we can explain away, especially with the previous scene and her son. We see the Strongs returning to Harrenhal, but they're being also watched over by those shadowy individuals that Sir Larys Strong basically recruited. See, there they are. They don't look like very nice chaps. And both Strongs basically die. There's a fire, and the father tries to let the son out, but then he gets crushed by burning things, and then we see two bodies later on. We see Rhaenyra coming to Dragonstone, and so the episode is wrapping up, but it does end on a bit of a bombshell, right? And so, and a great monologue by Larys from his perspective. So, it's awful what he's saying. He's saying basically, children are key to people's undoing, and that I can't remember all the words, but from his perspective, it's perfectly justified in what it's doing, and how they juxtapose what they show, the result of, here's someone who's dead as a result of his own child, and then you see, they show the king here, thinking, he's got the ring of his wife that died in the episode 1, and so the juxtaposition of what, is shown on screen while this monologue is happening, works really, really well. We see, Daemon's children crying over their mother's death as well. And then we cut to Larys, who is giving the monologue. And so Alicent just asks, are they dead? You've heard the stories of Harrenhal, your grace. And he explains that basically, yeah, they are. Alicent asks him, was he the one that did it? You passed the judgment. And he says, the queen makes a wish. What servant of the realm would not strive to fulfill it? Yeah, admitting it, but also explain. It's an admission that he did it, while at the same time explaining why, and that he's saying, I did it for you. You wanted your father to be the hand of the king. I saw a way to make it happen. really interesting. Now, look, it shows that Alicent is willing to excuse some pretty dark stuff if it serves her. So, I'm not, even though I think she's quite justified in a lot of what she does, she's far from perfect, okay? Still, that gets her what she wants, and it also shows to what level Laris Strong is able or willing to go to. And it's a bit of a bombshell ending, so I like how it ended, and it just shows that this guy is going to be a major player as well. And that's it. That's Game of Thrones episode 6. Look, there's a lot to praise in it. A lot of great politics, conflict, all those good things that we do enjoy. There's some points of criticism. I didn't enjoy it as much as other episodes, but I can really see, look, very well done, and I do still have confidence the show is going to keep going really well. Let me know what you think. Did you like this episode? Was it your favourite? Do you think my criticism was valid or not, justified or not? Love to read it in the comments below. Look forward to that, and of course, I will see you next time. As we always, stay on watch.
Shadow of the Conqueror is the breakout debut novel by Shad M. Brooks.
Truly incredible. I absolutely loved this book. Honestly, it's one of the best books I've ever read. S. Keith Hall.
Now, Shadow of the Conqueror is coming to you in an epic graphic novel adaptation with the incredibly talented art of Mike S. Miller. This will bring its dark, confronting story to fans and new readers alike in another beloved format, making the story more accessible than ever before, and enabling current fans to enjoy it in new ways.
I was engrossed in the tale of the Conqueror. I laughed, cried, growled with anger, and shouted with joy. But also during this entertaining ride of emotion, I came away with mental growth and new perspective on the human condition. Andrew Johnson.
Mike is a 28-year veteran of the comic book industry, famous for his work on DC Comics' Injustice series and George R.R. Martin's Game of Thrones-related graphic novels.
I've read so many novels I've lost count, fantasy genre or otherwise, but in my opinion, this is one of the best. Seaton 425.
The author of Shadow of the Conqueror, Shad M. Brooks, has been a fan of both comic books and Mike's work for many years, and is thrilled to be working with him to bring this graphic novel to the highest standards possible.
I don't typically listen to audiobooks multiple times, but this is my 4th time through and I'm loving it more each time. Highly recommend for anyone who loves fantasy action stories. C. Barker.
The book will be separated into 4 graphic novel volumes. This first one, entitled Enemies of Self, has 48 pages of stunning art visualizing the amazing and unique world of Everfall with some of the best work Mike has ever done.
It must be admitted that there was a large amount of skepticism when this book was recommended. However, a story that would leave the reader hooked and begging for more was not something that was expected. The overall plot and flow of the story was simply phenomenal. I highly recommend this book. It is filled with action, humor, love, hate, science, and the psychology of the human condition. History Rewriter.
Separating the book into 4 volumes gives great opportunity to adapt more of the work and even add new content not seen in the original novel. Far from being given secondary regard as a token adaptation that doesn't accurately represent the source material, the graphic novels are being made with the intent to form a crucial part of the Everfall story, revealing fascinating aspects to the characters and world not found in any other format.
Powerful and gut-wrenching. I laughed, introspected, winced, wondered, cried, and will be revisiting this world. Michael Larson.
At the time of launching this Indiegogo campaign, the graphic novel is completed and ready to print. This is not to fund the creation of the graphic novel, but to give you the chance to get your hands on it. We will be able to place the print order as soon as this launch campaign ends, and you will get the graphic novel in your hands much sooner without needing to wait for the graphic novel's completion. With the launch of the graphic novel, I'm very excited to announce that during this Indiegogo campaign, I will be releasing a refined version of Shadow of the Conqueror as a second edition version. This is not the sequel, but a more refined and polished version of Shadow of the Conqueror, with an incredible new cover made by Chris McGrath. The second edition will at first be an exclusive in the Indiegogo campaign, where you will be able to get your hands on a limited edition version of the second edition novel with the graphic novel covers, which will not be available ever again once this launch campaign ends. And in addition to this, we've gone even further and made premium, high-class, display-quality, collector edition, leather-bound versions of the second edition novel and graphic novel, both of which will be available for a limited time during this launch campaign.
Way better than I thought it would be. Bought because I watched Shad on YouTube. I never thought his book would be as good as this is. Kinda blown away. Jevin Curley.
With special collector edition covers and limited Everfall merchandise, this is your one and only chance to secure these special versions of this phenomenal epic fantasy graphic novel. Just because the mainstream comic book industry is declining in both quantity and quality, doesn't mean we still can't make great graphic novels for those who love them and attract new fans to the format. Please share this Indiegogo campaign with as many people you feel would be interested and who would love to enjoy such a visually stunning and emotionally riveting story as this Chronicles of Everfall, Shadow of the Conqueror, Volume 1, Enemies of Self.